Your cardinal has already decided if he trusts you, and you have no idea what tipped it. He watches you walk to the feeder and go inside, and in those moments, he made a call. Most people assume feeder birds react to noise and movement. That is not all that is happening, because nobody ever told them what a bird is actually doing when he watches. Subscribe to Bird Sense right now. This is exactly the kind of thing we uncover every week, and what your cardinal has already decided about you and what it took for him to get there. That is what changes everything. To understand what he is actually doing, you have to understand that individual human recognition in wild birds is not a theory or a behavioral guess. It is documented, repeatable, and specific. Researchers at institutions across the United States conducted controlled experiments exposing wild birds to individual human faces, same clothing, same approach patterns. Only the faces changed. The birds responded differently to different people, not to body size, not to how fast someone moved, not to what they were wearing, to faces specifically. The distinction held across repeated trials in ways that ruled out coincidence or generalized wariness, and it showed up consistently across multiple species, including birds no larger than your cardinal. He is not reacting to you as a category of person. He is reacting to you as a specific individual he has encountered before, whose face he has stored, and whose behavior he has been tracking one morning at a time, in his yard, on whatever schedule you happen to keep. Here is where it gets strange. The visual processing required to recognize and distinguish individual human faces is something researchers did not expect to find operating at this level in a small songbird. A cardinal's visual system is built for speed and pattern recognition, detecting a hawk at distance, reading the plumage of a rival male at a glance, tracking fast movement through dense cover. What nobody anticipated was that the same system could build and retain templates of individual human faces, storing them accurately enough to make reliable distinctions even when clothing, body language, and approach angle change from visit to visit. He is running something close to face recognition software inside a brain that weighs less than a quarter, and he has been running it on you since the first morning you stepped into his yard and became part of the landscape he has to manage. Which means every time you walk outside, your cardinal is running a check, pulling a stored template and matching it against what he sees in real time. Is this the person who fills the feeder and backs away without crowding? Is this the one who lingers too close before eventually leaving? Is this someone he has no record on yet? The answer shapes everything about how he behaves next. How long he holds his position on the branch, how quickly he returns to the feeder after you go back inside, how much buffer he keeps between himself and where you are standing. None of it looks like recognition from a kitchen window in Georgia or a back porch in Tennessee. It just looks like a bird being a bird. But every one of those behavioral choices is being driven by a file he has built specifically on you, updated every time you appear in his space, refined across dozens of unremarkable mornings you probably did not think twice about. Most people across the country, backyards from Minnesota down to Florida, apartment balconies in Chicago, garden feeders in suburban Virginia, develop these relationships without ever knowing it is happening. They notice the cardinal seems less skittish than he used to be, or that he stays on the feeder longer when it is them, specifically, who steps outside. They put it down to the bird getting used to activity in general, to the yard becoming familiar. What has actually happened is that the bird has filed them individually, built a template, run enough observations to assign it a trust level, and quietly adjusted his behavior to match. The adjustment is never dramatic. It is subtle, consistent, and built entirely on what you have given him to observe over weeks and months of ordinary mornings in your own yard. But researchers found something they did not expect when they looked more closely at how these trust assignments get built. The rating is not static. It is weighted toward recent behavior, and it updates in response to what you do. A person who approaches the feeder too closely on a Tuesday afternoon in a backyard in North Carolina may find the Cardinal's response measurably different the following week. More distance kept, an earlier flush when approached, a longer wait before returning to the feeder. The bird does not process the close approach as an isolated incident and move on. He logs it, adjusts the weight he assigns to that template, and modifies his behavior going forward, which means the relationship you have with your Cardinal right now is a running score, and you have been adding to it, positively or negatively, every single time you step outside, whether or not you had any idea you were being evaluated, which means the people in your household may have very different standings with the same bird, from the same feeder, in the same yard, across the same months. Researchers studying songbirds in residential settings across the Pacific Northwest and Northeast have found exactly this. Different individuals in the same household receiving consistently different responses from the same territorial bird over time. The person who manages the feeder predictably gets treated as a known and relatively safe presence. The person who appears irregularly gets the kind of distance a bird gives to something it has not yet fully categorized. Same bird, same feeder, entirely different files, built from what each person gave him to work with across the same stretch of ordinary mornings. The bird did not assign these standings based on who seemed friendliest. He assigned them based on what each person actually did in his space, in his site, on his schedule. Here is where it gets even stranger. The trust he extends to you does not carry over to anyone else. Your Cardinal's assessment of you is yours alone. It does not generalize to people who look like you, move like you, or show up wearing the same clothes. Every individual who enters your yard gets their own evaluation, their own template, their own score built from scratch, which means a house guest stepping into your backyard in suburban Ohio, or a relative visiting your yard in rural Texas, is starting from zero, regardless of how easily they get along with every other living thing in their day-to-day life. The bird does not factor in social context, warmth, or intent. He factors in the record he has built through direct observation, and a person without a record is simply an unknown, and unknowns get the full cautious treatment until they earn something different, which means the next time your Cardinal sits on that branch and watches you walk to the feeder, something specific is happening behind those eyes. He is not watching you the way a decoration watches a room. He is watching you the way something watches something it has already evaluated, checking whether today's approach matches the file, deciding in real time whether this visit confirms what he already knows or introduces something worth updating. You have a relationship with this bird that you did not build on purpose and cannot fully read from your side of the glass. He built it from observation, he updates it every morning, and he has almost certainly already made up his mind about where you stand. The only question is whether you have been giving him the right data, and the uncomfortable answer is that you have been giving him data since day one, whether you knew it or not.